We all think we know the story of the forbidden fruit, right? But what if it's not just a simple story about temptation? What if it's actually a profound psychological blueprint for how our own minds are built, about how our attention and our desire literally shape the world we see? Yeah, let's dive into that. So, here's the big question we're going to tackle. We're going to re-examine this ancient story, not as some dusty historical event, but as a map for understanding that clash of attention, desire, and trust that, let's be honest, plays out inside each of us every single day. Okay, first things first, we have to totally reimagine what the Garden of Eden even is. Think of it less as a physical place and more like a psychological state, a map of meaning. The idea here is that it represents a state of unconscious harmony. A world where humans, nature, and the divine were all just seamlessly integrated. It's a world before all that intense self-reflection and the anxiety that comes along with it. Now, within this map, those two famous trees aren't just random props or arbitrary rules. No, they are the structural poles of this psychological reality. They actually represent two fundamentally different ways of existing in the world. On one side, you've got the tree of life. This symbolizes a life that's sustained by trust, by simply receiving what is given. On the other side, you have the tree of knowledge, and that represents a totally different path, grasping for wisdom on your own terms through your own will. The entire drama hinges on the choice between these two ways of being. So, how does the choice get made? Well, this brings us right to the heart of our explainer. See, the story isn't just about eating a piece of fruit. It's about how we look at the world, because how you look at something fundamentally changes what it is. The philosopher Ian McGilchrist put this so powerfully. He said, attention is a moral act. It creates, brings aspects of things into being, but in doing so makes others recede. Just think about that for a second. Attention isn't passive. It's not like a camera just recording what's there. It's an active creative force. When you focus on one aspect of a thing, other aspects just fade into the background. Your attention is literally bringing a specific reality into being. And this is where we see the serpent's strategy. It is brilliant. He doesn't even start with an outright lie. Instead, he pulls off this masterful act of psychological judo. In God's framing, the tree is a boundary that defines a relationship of trust. But the serpent, he completely reframes it. Just by redirecting Eve's attention, the tree is no longer a boundary. It's now an isolated, alluring object of desire. And the moment her attention shifts, boom, a whole new reality emerges. Genesis 3:6 spells it out perfectly. The tree, which was just another part of the garden, is now seen through three brand new lenses. First, a practical lens. It's good for food. Then an aesthetic one. It's attractive to the eye. And finally, an ambitious one. It's desirable for making one wise. See? The temptation isn't in the fruit itself, but in this brand new way of seeing it. So once that attention is fixed, this powerful psychological engine just kicks into gear. And what's wild is that modern neuroscience actually gives us some fascinating tools to understand what's happening, under the hood during this process. Neuroscientists Terry Robinson and Kent Berridge came up with the wanting and liking theory. It shows that the intense motivation to get something, the wanting, operates on a completely different brain system than the actual pleasure you get from it, the liking. This is the core mechanism behind addiction. The wanting can spiral totally out of control, even if the liking has all but disappeared. In the story, the serpent is a master at igniting that wanting system. This is then compounded by what philosophers call twisted self-deception. The more a possibility occupies your attention, the more real it feels. You start to weigh any little piece of evidence in its favor as significant, while you dismiss all the evidence against it. Your attention actually causes you to weigh the evidence incorrectly, and you don't even realize it's happening. The forbidden fruit starts to feel not just like an option, but like the only logical one. Now, all this begs a really crucial question. Why was there a prohibition in the first place? Was it just some arbitrary setup for failure? Well, the material we're looking at suggests a completely different answer. The command wasn't a trap. It's better to think of it as what you might call a diagnostic situation. It's a moment designed to reveal the true state of a relationship. By creating a boundary, a point of vulnerability and choice, it establishes the very structure necessary for trust to even exist. After all, if there's no choice, trust is completely meaningless. So let's just break down the anatomy of this kind of moral test. First, you establish a relationship of trust. Second, you set a boundary, and that creates vulnerability, which is essential for trust. Third, this boundary creates competing desires. In this case, the desire to maintain trust versus the desire for self-acquired knowledge. And finally, the choice made in that moment doesn't just break the relationship, it reveals its true pre-existing state. So ultimately, the action was just the external sign of an internal decision that had already been made. It was a choice to abandon a relationship based on trust and dependence in favor of a new mode of being, one based on your own will and your own self-acquired wisdom. And the consequences of this choice are profound. The fall can be understood not just as a punishment, but as a pivotal and pretty painful shift in the very nature of human consciousness. The immediate aftermath is deeply psychological. First, there's a sudden awareness of their own vulnerability. They knew they were naked. This isn't just about a lack of clothes. It's a new, shocking sense of being fragile and exposed. And this gives rise to what psychologist Jordan Peterson calls intrapsychic conflict, basically an internal war with ourselves, full of competing desires and anxieties. And what's the immediate impulse? To hide. This quote from Peterson offers a really powerful explanation. We don't just hide from judgment. Why hide from God? Because knowledge of vulnerability makes us shrink from our own potential. Wow. We hide because becoming aware of our own vulnerability, our own capacity for failure and suffering, it makes us terrified of our own potential. To live fully is to risk everything, and that knowledge can be paralyzing. So the fall isn't merely an ending to a perfect paradise. It's a beginning. It's the birth of self-consciousness, with all its accompanying anxiety, toil, and conflict. It's the moment we are thrust out of timeless, unconscious harmony and into the flow of human history. It's complicated, it's painful, but it's also where our story truly begins. And this brings us right back to the present. That tree, that choice between two ways of being, isn't confined to some ancient story. It stands before us every single day in countless forms. The moral test is a test of attention. So the final question is for you. Where is your attention now? What reality are you bringing into being?